And we're live. Welcome, welcome. We're very excited to be here with you again. It's Friday, and this is your favorite show for no particular reason. I am your host, Yanko, and we're here with my co host, wonderful co host, Kerri Lewis, who is a speaker and a coach and helps a lot of her people to go through addiction and mental health. I particularly do hypnotism, and so that's pretty much it. Let's get the ball rolling. How are you feeling today, Kerri?
I am amazing. I'm coming in from New York City, Times Square, where I have just been open to wonderful experiences going with the flow. What about you?
Oh, it's Friday. Ready to finish the week and just kind of have some time to myself and some family time. It's always good to look forward to some time off on the end of the week. That's pretty much it. Whether it's kind of getting to be, we're getting in that time of the year, so I can't really complain about that.
It's interesting. I'm curious, do you take time for yourself throughout the week, or do you just kind of wait until the end of the week and catch up with family and yourself?
Well, I used to be really like strict about like how I go, but that kind of put me in a how do I say, a confined schedule or anything. Now I mostly go with the flow, so I'm still finding time when I feel like I need to, but I'm not that strict as like, okay, I have to have 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours before I go to sleep to like just kind of zen and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I tell my clients too. I'm a big fan of fluid discipline now for myself, but I
Hmm.
think that comes after you've created those habits for a while because it then changes the neural pathways in your brain and
That's
it
right.
just becomes something you will naturally default to until you have that practice though consistently. I do think schedules are really important, and the reason I ask is I think so often people put off self care or really taking care of themselves until the end of the week or the weekend. And I find that people are more burnt out and more reactive when you're not incorporating moments of self care throughout each day.
That's right. And I usually will notice that like if I can be in, like if I'm not in peace myself, I can be working with a client because then I can be 100% with my client. So if I feel like I'm at that point, then I'll just reschedule the appointment that I have with a client because I have to be like 100%, like everything has to be perfect. Does that
Yeah,
make
I
sense?
agree with you. I'm very big about communicating with the people that I work with that I prioritize my needs first because of the work we do. If I'm not showing up grounded and in peace and, you know, um, in tune, honestly, with myself and the energy around me, then I won't show up in service to somebody else because it's a disservice in my opinion,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
Because there's like the potentiality of me projecting my own ideology onto them or taking something personally or responding in a way that is very um self self-absorbed, not in a negative way, but coming from my own internal work rather than just being able to hold space for people and working with them where they're at without taking on any of their emotions or feelings or experiences.
That's right. And sometimes it could be overwhelming if I pick up like um, feelings and other things from people. Am I gonna have to go for a walk to just kind of like get it off and just come back to center? Um, So I would like to think that I'm in okay position right now, but anything can change in a second because everything it's fluid. Life just flows and we flow with it.
Yeah, but you're able to come back to peace regardless of what's going on externally. And I have to tell you, being in New York City has been a real gift to me in that respect because it's such a busy place to be. There's so much energy, there's so much going on. And I love being
Right,
able to just practice grounding in any given moment where I'm at in this
right.
really like chaotic and crazy and exciting space and still being able to really ground into myself. It just keeps showing me that the work that I keep doing on myself is really allowing me to be peaceful no matter what my experience is.
That's right. And we're kind of touched upon that yesterday when we talked. I I said, like I don't want to be in crowded spaces. Like I don't want to, go to this go, you know, busyness in everything that's going on in New York because it's kind of I don't know. I won't say that I can compare it because I haven't been in New York, but from what I've seen and heard from other people, I can only conclude that it's busy as in Chicago. Because here, anytime you go downtown in Michigan Street, it's just full. Like there is tourists and there's all kinds of things going on. There's street artists, people are playing, drumming, doing different things, and it's just like, oh, in the traffic, it's just, yeah. I feel like I could be better off somewhere in the boonies, like away and just in nature. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I much like you, I go with the flow. And so, being in New York is just as enjoyable for me as being in nature because I have incorporated enough tools and continue to take part in enough self-care throughout the day that I can ground in peace wherever. And I know how to take care of myself in any given moment. So if it's crazy and chaotic, and it becomes too much for me, I'll just leave and not think twice and then come back to the hotel and ground and take care of myself. So,
Wonderful. It's not as that it's more of a preference to me. Like if I can choose from one and the other, that what
yeah.
I'll choose. It's not that it's like very uncomfortable and like yeah I can deal with it or anything. It's just a preference of mine that if I have to choose between one or the other, that's what I'll prefer to be somewhere out in nature. Maybe in a ranch house with a barn, couple animals, different things, garden, things like that.
Well, it was just as you're saying that, I was thinking about the fact that we did not tell the audience that we went live on podcast this week.
And something happened, but here you are. So something,
Here I am to save
yeah.
the day. Mighty Mouse, I don't know the rest of the song.
But yeah, we haven't told our audience that we decided to turn this into a podcast. So now we're on iTunes and all your favorite podcasting platforms. So you don't actually have to be live with us. It's wonderful that you can listen to our conversations in the comfort of your car when you're driving around and enjoy. Did I lost you again?
No, yeah, you're frozen. But it's a great frozen. You know when you have those times when you
Okay.
freeze and you're like, yeah, no, it's not that. So you're doing good. So I can't actually see you, but I hear you, so we're doing good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm super excited about being on a podcast because, the reason why Yanko and I started the show, one, We just really fed off each other's energy. But even more importantly, I think that, we both have done so much work around perspective and rewiring our brains to create a reality that feels really good rather than is just a product of what society tells us we need to it needs to look like, or how our family expects us to look like. And so we both started this because we wanted to encourage and empower other people to bring awareness to the fact that you have the ability to choose in any given moment what your experience is going to be. And when you
Hmm.
choose to support yourself, those experiences are generally more joyful, more peaceful, create more moments of joy and peace. And so to be able to offer that to the listening audience rather than just having people watch us is super cool. And I'm truly honored and so proud of us, Yanko, because you while you and I do go with the flow, putting ourselves out there, right? That took work to get us in the mental space to be able to show up unapologetically, not only on Facebook and LinkedIn and wherever we stream live to, but also on a platform where people have more opportunity to hear what we're saying.
That's right. And I want to, and I'm just happy that we're more accessible. It's more easier for people to enjoy the show. It's more accessible. Um, it's at least to me, I listen to a lot of audiobooks in my downtime when I'm driving, or in podcasts and shows and everything else. And to me, that was kind of like, yeah, I like to be able to do that for other people, to be able to enjoy while they're driving around, or don't have to be like particularly on the phone and watch us. Which I appreciate our viewers, joining us and be able to interact with us direct and ask any questions that we can answer and my answer. That's always a bonus. So feel free to do either way, to contact us either way, to watch us live or to listen to the podcast. But uh, the name of the show is the same for no particular reason. You can find us on any of the major search engines for podcasts.
Sweet. So what else is going on? What you want to talk about today, Yanko?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have any particular topic in mind. You know how we go with the flow. It's usually like whatever comes to mind, and we just kind of pick it up from there, and we go in different directions, and it's kind
So
of
let's talk about the importance of perspective.
that sounds that sounds fun. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So what is your understanding around perspective?
My understanding around perspective. Well, usually personally or towards other people, like I'm not quite sure. Like if I have to talk about my own perspective towards something, um, and I'm sure that applies for other people, is that how they view situation from through their eyes or through the lens in that very moment. And usually, if I catch myself limiting my perspective towards something and just like say focusing on one thing, and I'm feeling like there's no other situations or abilities to do something else, then I'll stop and rethink on what I'm focusing on, so I can see if I'm having different perspectives, or like how can I see it from a different lens or a different angle.
Yeah, I love that. I think for me it's similar in that I have an opportunity in any given moment and in any experience that I'm having to choose how I see that experience, right?
Mhm.
Am I in suffering because of that experience? Am I choosing to be grateful because I'm able to learn because of that experience? Am I choosing to sit in joy rather than in sadness and an experience. And so for me, perspective has allowed me to recreate my entire world, because the experiences that I once thought of as um disempowering and caused me a lot of grief then became the very experiences that caused me to feel empowered and uh joyful and curious about what it is that I'm able to achieve and uh experience in my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sometimes, and it doesn't have to be only in decision making. Like, I can be in situation where I'm just communicating with somebody and we're just exchanging ideas, and I can enjoy somebody else's perspective and see how they see the world from their lens and how they think things are, in not from like judgmental kind of way, but kind of like just seeing it as is, not judging their perspective, but just kind of seeing it. And it's almost like, um, what do I compare this to? Maybe like going through art gallery, art show, and you're not trying to understand the art, you're just seeing it as what is, and you're not attached to how a particular painting or something might look, or sculpture. You're just there and you go like, this is something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you a good example. Last night, Nana and I were coming back from Harlem, and he ordered a ride share, right? We go in, Uber,
Hmm.
whatever. And so this gentleman comes up and is like, you can only have one person. This is a ride share. And he's a little gruff about it. But Nana and I naturally default to kindness. Like, I really will make a conscious choice to just be kind, regardless of whatever the person is, the energy the person is giving to me, because I don't know where they're coming from. So anyway, we went back and forth a little bit, and we're like, sorry, like, no big deal. We'll just call another ride. Apologies. Anyway, this gentleman ended up offering to give us a ride, and you know immediately he was a little bit defensive, and I had a perspective of, wow, like, this guy's super uptight. And then I shifted. I said, well, what if I open up the conversation and get more curious about where he's from, which then led to a beautiful conversation about him being from Nigeria, and how he was able to break down his idea about white people and how they showed up in the world because of a young white gentleman who helped him when he flipped his car over and his wife was 9 months pregnant. And so for me, perspective is always the way I show up is I always try to come from a perspective of curiosity and love. I could have easily judged this gentleman, right? Oh, he's a jerk. He's yelling at us because we didn't know what we're doing. We're in New York. But if I did that, right, I'm shutting down my energy, and I would never have been able to engage in what ended up being a very fruitful and beautiful connection with this man who, is in his own right teaching people all about love and breaking down boundaries and not judging people based on, their religious ideology and their skin color. And that's why I often talk to my clients and to the community about the importance of opening up your perspective. Don't a lot like work to not judge an experience, but rather ask yourself, how can I show up so that this is more supportive for me, rather than making it or having it feel really hard.
Right. In usually that happens when programs come back, and they came back from like experience that you have as a person, and at least that's how it used to be with me, and sometimes that happens to me too still, but it's very rare where something will come in and I'll judge it based on whatever the mind will throw at me, because in any situation, my mind will try to make a sense of the situation based on what's going on, and it'll compare from like past experiences, or something will come in, and then it'll be like, oh, based on this and that and this and that, and because this is happening, this will be what will happen. And this is what happens with people. But if you're doing some sort of practice where you observe your thoughts, or you're doing some kind of like a mental cleaning per se, or you're mindful of like, what are you digesting, like what are you consuming, as much as like books, videos, media, or who are you surrounding yourself with, like are your friends and people and everybody support you and like uplift you, or do you like bring you down, like what are you getting, like where are you getting the information from? And when you get to that point where you're kind of mindful of like what's going on, then when those things come out, you don't jump into conclusions, and that gives you more opportunity to have a different perspective. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm different than you because, and I tell my clients this from my own experience of doing this work, right? Almost always ego comes up. Almost always that old pattern of thinking and behavior is the very first thing that I experience. The only difference now than, in past years and when I was younger is that I know that I don't have to attach myself to that habit or belief, and I can choose something differently. So 20 years ago, I would have encountered that same gentleman and immediately been defensive, probably told him to F off and just went and got another cab. And then that energy would have gone into the other cab, and it would have been a spiral into a night that was like this. But because I'm just aware that in any given moment I can choose how I want to feel, and I always say I want to sit in joy and love. I recognize, ooh, that's not that's not going to be true for me anymore. I don't want that to be true, and then I choose differently. And so for people who are like, oh, how do you get to a point where you don't have those old patterns or those beliefs? I don't know, because I haven't achieved that yet, guys. I've just done enough self-care practice that I don't respond. I my ego kicks in, but then I just pause and I'm like, that doesn't serve me. That does not align with what I want to experience right now. So I'm not going to take action on it. I'm not going to feed that belief anymore. And that's super important, right? Because what we choose to do in any given moment is creating our experience, whether we're peaceful or anxious, fearful or in love and curiosity. So, yeah, it's important for me that I share with people that, because it's a practice. It doesn't, you don't just not experience your beliefs and habits that have been embedded in you from in utero to 6 or 7, and then over your lifetime right away. Cause it just, it's a,
Yeah, they don't go away. I still have things that come up, and usually I just kind of, when they come out, I just kind of laugh, and I laugh, and I'm like, really, like you coming up again? Like, didn't we done this already? And- you know what I mean?
yeah, I love that. And I'll go back to a story that I share often, because I think that it proves a point of the fact that we are programmed and we have a choice to create our programs, right? I'll never forget, it was at this point, maybe 5 years ago, I had a realization that I was very afraid of being in a room with a bunch of black men, not individually, but more than a couple. Because I've always grown up and my parents have always brought me up to believe, everybody's equal, and I'm super grateful. But in a room full of black men, I had this fear, and I'm like, oh my God, what is it? And I never really got to the root of why I did. I have my ideas, right? Like in the 90s, I watched Cops, and it was always the black men were bad and they were getting arrested for crack, whatever, right? So we were being fed this fear. When I became aware of it, of course, then I had a choice. Do I want to continue to experience this, or do I want to shift my perspective? Do I want to feel differently? So I started to immerse myself in situations where I was around a bunch of black men, and I taught my brain and I taught myself to feel naturally safe. But going back to what you were saying, yesterday I'm in Harlem, I'm walking through the middle of the streets. Because of that being my condition, the first thought was, "Ooh, you need to be afraid." But then I was like, no, I don't. That's not even true. I'm having a great time. In fact, I can smile at all these beautiful souls and engage in conversation and get to know a little bit about them. And that's just what I did. So again, it's because that was something that I grew up with for whatever reason, and I don't know, and I don't even care. It was the first thought I had. I just decided that that didn't feel good for me. That wasn't what I wanted to experience, and so I chose something different. And I stacked evidence proving that the new belief that I had, which is I can feel safe and engage in beautiful conversation with people of all walks of life, whether they're in a group or in individuals, no matter where I am. I I created that, so now I feel safe in that situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's different for everyone. Like some people change their system quickly because like what works for me it doesn't work for somebody else, and what works for somebody else doesn't work for me. Um, I'm going through a book right now that it's going through 102 ways to like quiet your chatter in the mind, like 102 or yeah 102 ways I think it is to like have different type of experience that you can shift your perspective because like there's so many difference in the world with like how the psyche works for everybody because there's like techniques that helps you with sound, there's techniques with like body things or postures or different things. It's just an amazing to see like how many different ways there are in I'm sure they're not enough to fit everybody in to be able to like help them have a peace of mind or have a quiet mind per se to be able to experience everything just as because you always throw your colors on whatever situation or whatever scenario you're in. um, just driving a car, somebody cut your in the front, and bam, you have something. You might even be so much in that situation that you might not see what's around you, and because you're just kind of limiting yourself in that moment. So being able to just be in the moment and experience what's happening around you, it's wonderful. And not only that, but it's like what do I compare it to? I almost forgot about that growing up. But when I was young, like a little child, everything looked so vibrant. Everything looks so interesting. Everything looks so like, yeah, you look at something and you're like, yeah, and you can have spontaneous desires to do something, or like maybe smell a flower, or maybe whatever the situation is. So when you're in that state when there's no um, chatter going in inside, telling you what to do and what not to do, or how you should be, or different emotions and everything, and just being in the moment is like almost as a child like, then everything it's 1,000 times better.
Well, that's a practice within itself, right? Because we've been conditioned to go, 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 go. And in fact, I just got off um, a call with a client, and and I see this all the time, will project outward. Like, we care so deeply about other people. So it's like, oh my God, I got to focus on my kid. My kid's going through this. Or, oh my God, my boss is having this crisis. So I got to jump in and do that. And what we fail to realize is when we stop looking externally and then say, oh, wow, I feel like I'm constantly having to take care of everybody else. What's that about? And we give ourselves permission to then get quiet and sit with ourselves. We nurture ourselves, and that's where you'll be able to experience those moments of real joy. But we've been so conditioned to take care of the needs of everybody else, to produce, to be doing, to operate from a position of needing to get an end result, that it's difficult for people in the beginning to say, oh, I can prioritize me. I can look at what's going on internally for me so that I can, in fact, stop and smell that rose and not feel guilty, so that I can sit and soak up a bath in the middle of the day in between clients instead of putting out content to build my business or whatever. And that's super important, and something I want to continue to drive home for people. You got to start giving yourself permission. And when you find yourself bumping up against resistance because of that, that's when you want to lean even more into a practice of self-care or curiosity, because it's just your habit kicking in, saying, nope, you're used to doing this, so you can't do something different. But you can, in fact, do it, and it's doing it differently that's going to get you a different result.
Yeah, that's correct. And for some of the people that are on that situation, giving yourself permission is the best thing to do, because like a lot of the times you don't even realize that you're in a place where you need to give yourself permission to stop. And and that's why a lot of the times, or not a lot of times, but lately I've been thinking that, what will come out of the situation. Say you're having to go somewhere, and there is a traffic and there's anything, and if you think of it, like, imagine in your mind, like, what will come out of that. Like, if I don't make it on time, what will come out of that? Or if something, like, and then what will come out of that, like, to see all the different variations and possibilities. At least to me, when I do that, I realize that it's not like matter of, life and death. Like, there will be no, like, okay, it will be unfavorable if I miss an appointment with somebody, but I can't predict every situation in life. Like, I can't predict if I'm stuck in traffic. I can't predict if I have a flat tire, or if something comes out of nowhere. Like, I can plan, but usually, now that I have a different perspective on life, I say that the map, it's not the territory. Like, you can plan and have a map, but when you go, the map, it's not actually the territory. Very many things can happen, and different things can happen. So if you master the ability to give yourself permission, that'll be a good step towards internal peace.
Yeah. For me, I had to give myself permission to not engage with some of my family members anymore. And I think that that's something that people really struggle with. But when I understood that I was in control of my own peace, that I could not control anybody else's experiences, not my siblings, not my parents, not my grandparents, not anybody, right? The only person I could control is my peace. And when I realized that, if I'm around certain people who I just happened to grow up with, I didn't feel peaceful, I gave myself permission to disengage with them. And it's interesting because I talk extensively to a lot of my clients who, especially when they struggle with addiction, you know, really feel angst and unsure and just icky, right? Icky when they're surrounded by some of the people they grew up with. And yet, the very idea of disconnecting with them causes them severe guilt because, again, a belief is they're your family, blood thicker than water, blah, blah, blah. Even if that family member is destructive to your uh self-confidence, even if they're abusive, right? We hold on to this belief it's family, you got to stick in. And I'm like, you can give yourself permission to walk away from that. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that those people for you in this time don't serve you. They don't nurture you. They don't support you. And we as humans, guys, we have the intrinsic right, and we are worthy of feeling safe, joyful, and peaceful at all times. And I really encourage you guys to give yourself permission to start to at least get curious about what that could look like and what choices that means that may need to take. And I'll tell you, I don't feel one bit of guilt about not engaging in people who don't or are not in the same place as me. And it doesn't mean I don't love them, and it doesn't mean that I judge them. It just means that where they are at in their life doesn't serve me where I'm at in my life, and I choose to be happy. And I'm going to pick happiness over being around people who I grew up with who are my blood.
Well, I'm thinking of boundaries. That's what I can say. Because,
Mm.
like, if you have healthy boundaries, it doesn't matter who you are with, and it doesn't matter what serves you and what doesn't serve you. I'm thinking if you set healthy boundaries, then there will be no misunderstanding or anything. And I still have like difficult time with setting boundaries, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm very good at setting boundaries. And I teach people how to set boundaries, and I also teach people how to deliver tough conversations in a way that, if nothing else, it's delivered from a place of kindness and compassion for all involved, right? So me saying, "Listen, I love you immensely, but at this time in my life, I need to take a step back to take care of myself," right? I'm not trashing another person. I'm simply saying I'm focusing on what feels right for me, and that is a practice. But again, I really want to encourage anybody listening. It is so important that you get this. You get to feel safe anywhere you go. You get to feel good. You get to know that the people that you're around are going to lift you up and encourage you and support you. Your wild dreams, your crazy haircuts, your whatever it is, rather than mock you for you wanting to show up as the individual that you are, or chase a dream that may seem so obscure to somebody else. And too often, I find that we are stuck as humans in these belief systems that because I get a paycheck from this boss, he gets to yell at me and talk poorly to me. Somebody I love immensely was telling me that recently, that his boss keeps yelling at him and blaming him for all the things that go wrong in the job, right? You Just because you're getting paid doesn't mean that you signed up to get treated poorly. Absolutely not. Boundaries, you can implement boundaries in a workplace. And in fact, I did that, and I got a lot of heat for doing it. But I'm telling you right now, I just know that I'm worthy of being treated well, and I'm not going to settle or allow anybody to treat me poorly. And you can set up boundaries and do it in a very healthy and kind way, and make sure that you're not projecting judgment on people, but taking care of yourself in a really supportive way. And again, for me, it was, man, I left a very successful job in corporate America because it just the person who was put in charge wanted me to change how I managed, and I refused because I know how I showed up served me, and it was in the highest good of the people that I worked with, because I believed in them and I pushed them to grow and expand rather than to just stay sedentary. So I quit because it didn't make him wrong, it didn't make me right. It just meant I wasn't willing to bend on what felt right for me.
That's right. And yeah, I don't know. I'm little different than that. Like I usually, because I'm observing the situation from non-reactive way, I don't I don't jump in. I don't tell people how they should be. Um, I just kind of see it, and it is what it is. So, and I don't know. It might be of like how everything unfolds, but if you having like a calm kind of energy of not like reacting and jumping in, because when you have conversations with people, you can feed from each other's energies and everything else. And if they're up and up and like maybe angry or something, and you're not reacting, usually that kind of subsides, and it goes to a different different experience altogether. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm gonna lovingly disagree here because I
Nothing's
have
wrong
to
with
tell
that.
you,
This is why we're making a good duo.
yeah, well, because here's the thing that I'm gonna tell people, and anybody who has any questions or whatever, feel free to either jump on and we'll respond to them, or message us and we'll get back to you. But when you start to incorporate boundaries with people that you've engaged with for any amount of time who are used to you showing up as one way, there's going to be pushback because you're changing the game. You're changing what they know. And so if
Well, not only that, and I apologize for interrupting, but you're breaking their pattern. Like it's a
exactly.
new thing for them. It's like getting from Macintosh to Windows or from Windows to Macintosh. Everything changes. Now you have to learn the whole thing all together from the beginning.
Right. And what happens with change? Most people are fearful of change. So when you start to create boundaries, you're going to get pushback, right? So and even when I sit in very like, non-reactive spaces, when I'm really coming from a lens of curiosity, depending on the person that I'm engaging with, they're not feeding off of that energy. They're feeling threatened because it feels new to them and it feels scary. And so it's being able to recognize that and understanding, just because they're responding that way doesn't mean you have to shift the work you're doing for yourself so that you can create you know practices and boundaries that make you feel safe. And more often than not, in the work that I do with people and teaching them and working with them to have tough conversations around getting their needs met, holding themselves accountable for being treated a certain way, it gets uncomfortable before it gets peaceful. So I really want people to understand. And I'll give you a really good example. You know, again, I don't come from judgment, and my job isn't to make you wrong. My job is to honor my experience, what feels right for me, right? So going back to that corporate job, it wasn't that this boss was wrong. That's how he chose to run his business. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. What matters is that did not feel right for me. And I wasn't willing to bend on what felt right for me so I could stay in that position. And so I quit, right? So it wasn't, and of course, I got to tell you, that person was shocked, had what, because I brought, what I brought to the table, did not expect me to quit on the spot. And but it was because I just know how to take care of myself. I know my worth, and I know what I'm willing to to experience and what I'm not. And I'm not willing to bend on how I show up. And at that time, I was not willing to bend on my principles as how I led, right?
Yeah,
And so that's
I was
really
gonna say,
important.
yeah, it's when you have a principles in place. That's why I was thinking the same way just before you said it.
Yeah. And here's the thing is, my thing is I show up from a lens of love, guys, but love isn't soft and fluffy all the time. And this is what most people don't understand. My intention every morning is to show up with courage and love in every interaction that I ever have, right? So with going back to the cab driver yesterday, well, the Uber driver, My instinct was to be defensive because that's what I've been brought up in, a world where you're being yelled at or like, aggressively talked to, so you need to come at him with that same energy, right? But then I naturally, because of my practices of self-care, I'm like, if I want to choose up his love, I'm going to choose a different response. I'm going to choose kindness. Okay, so sorry, my bad, didn't mean to do that, we just didn't know, right? And in doing that, I choose to be kind. But sometimes love is saying, I'm not willing to engage with you because the way in which you show up does not feel right for me. And I'm not attacking you. You can choose to behave that way. You can choose to try to control situations. You can operate the same way as and that's your choice. And I'm not trying to tell you you're wrong, but I don't have to choose to stay in and be around that. And I won't. And I
Yep.
do that even with my children. My kids have their perspectives, they're teenagers, they're reactive because that's generally, but I don't have to take on their experience and I choose not to. I can sit in love for them and tell them, hey, you know what? I understand you're feeling this way. You have every right to feel this way. I'm going to go someplace and when you're in a place where you want to talk about this in a calmer space, come talk to me. I'm happy to do so.
That's exactly right. And I'm having difficult time applying the same thing with my son, uh, because I had to come to a realization that he's his own man and he has to get his own experiences. And I
Yes.
don't have to project what I want because this is my wants for him, not what he wants for him. And so this is still kind of difficult to apply because like I'm not living his life. I'm having my life and he has his own life. And so that's also tricky, but this could be a whole nother episode.
Oh yeah, parenting 101. But I mean, it's a continued practice, right? Like again, I have a 16 and 15-year-old daughters, right? They have a stepfather, they have a father, they like there's so many intricacies, but again, anytime eh, and this is what I want people to know. Anytime it feels difficult, like you get to take care of yourself. It's not that I disconnect from my kids but if in that moment it feels like we're spinning our wheels and stuff, I don't need to take on their experience. I can go elsewhere because if I feel icky, what's going to happen? I'm just going to help create more mess. I'm just going to engage. I'm going to raise my voice. They're going to raise their voice. It's going to become more messy. I'll be more inclined to say things that I don't mean instead of being peaceful and saying, listen, I understand that this is how you feel. And you're entitled to feel that way. This is my perspective. And that feels more peaceful, and you get you get more with sweetness than you do with reaction. So that's it. But circling back to the beginning of what we started to talk about, and I hope bringing it full circle, at least kind of, is in each experience you're having, you get to decide one, how you feel. That's a perspective right there. And I encourage everybody to understand or start to become aware that you get to feel good all the time. Like you really do. You don't have to sit in fear. You don't have to sit in shame. You don't have to sit in guilt. But it's giving yourself permission to take on a different perspective. Um, and then taking action and setting boundaries like you were sharing, so that the perspectives that you have decided to cultivate that feel more nurturing and supportive for you can help you have those experiences that you do feel more joy, you do feel safer, you do achieve more abundance, you do have more connection, you do create relationships where people nurture and support you, rather than staying stuck in relationships that tear you down, even if it's within your own immediate family dynamic or within a workspace or within your kids. you guys get to create, you get to make a choice of how you want to experience um, this human experience you're having. And I hope that you experience it through the lens of joy and curiosity and peace.
Yeah, and you're joyful by default. So
Yes.
when you get to that point, it's not something that you do um, by pure force. It just happens naturally. It just when you're at peace, everything just happens, and then it's wonderful. Um, and it can be explained with words. So that's what I add to
But
that.
you can't explain, but I do want to tell you, I was telling this to somebody yesterday. We are so conditioned to suffer, guys, to sit in shame and guilt and anxiety and fear, that the minute we feel joy, most people, and I'm gonna encourage all of you guys to try this at home. Just like test it out. Don't listen to me, but test this out. You feel peaceful, you feel zen, and all of a sudden you say, oh, this is way too joyful, something's gonna happen, or oh, this is what's
That's
wrong with
right.
me? What's wrong with me that I'm
I
feeling
know.
good, right? And
Yes.
so think about that. That is wild. When I recognize that I was conditioned to sit in suffering and fear, I'm like, whoo, that's a game changer, because that means I can condition and create beliefs that say I can sit in unequivocal joy and peace and abundance. And that is what I've continued to cultivate in my brain. And guess what, guys? What you feed, what you cultivate, what you choose, your brain creates grooves, and it literally creates new neural pathways, and then that's what you experience. That's what you have more of. And so I naturally have more joyful experiences. Whereas there was one point in my life, if I sat in joy and bliss for a minute, forget about it. I thought something was wrong with me. And I
Yeah,
was waiting for the
or
shoe to
something
drop.
that's going to happen. You're going to get out of it, and that doesn't only apply to joy. That applies in other areas like abundance. Like, oh, I'm getting this. Something's about to happen. I'm not going to get enough, or this next thing it's going to just break. It's like, oh, I'm just so used to of like things not going my way, and everything just goes the way it's supposed to go. Like, what's wrong? Like something's gonna go wrong.
It's great. It's so funny. Or like I love, hey, Kerri, I met this new guy. He's great. Like something's got to be wrong with him. I'm like, why does something have to be wrong with him? Why? And it's so funny because again, when you think about that, then naturally you're gonna find fault, right? You're gonna find what is wrong with him instead of why can't this new guy just be amazing in this moment and just enjoy it. So anyway, with that, it is time to wrap up and say our goodbyes. What would you like to leave this beautiful, amazing group of people today with?
Hmm. Have a joyful weekend.
Mm,
I don't. I don't have to think of anything. Nothing really comes to mind, and usually, if it doesn't, then it's not important.
fair
So I would say, I wish everyone a wonderful weekend full of joy, happiness, family time, or whatever they desire or look forward to.
enough. And I'll leave you with this. If you're so called to, practice what Yanko and I just shared. And what I mean by that is when you catch yourself in an experience that feels really good, see how quickly your thoughts come in that try to tell you that feeling that good isn't normal or something's going to go wrong. I think you'll be really surprised at just how embedded these thoughts are and how often you think thoughts that make it so you are in fear rather than in love. I'll leave you with that. And with that, I do hope you guys all laugh well and often, because life is quite a joke when you really get down to it. It's just a series of
It's
unexpected lessons, and in those lessons are blessings if you look at them that way. So until next week, thank you all for joining. Big love. We will catch you on the flip
Same,
side.